Hi and welcome to this podcast based on the evaluation phase of the systems lifecycle. This is to do with OCR Computing A-Level F451. So the evaluation stage, what is it? Well, once a solution has been produced, it must be evaluated to decide whether or not it adequately solves the problem that was set. So essentially what happens here is we have rigorous testing. Evaluation, we're trying to see if it works, we're testing the solution to see if it works. So the importance of testing. The client has to evaluate the system and ensure the requirements have been met. So it's important for the client for that reason, but the analyst must evaluate the system to provide evidence that they should get paid. So there's two reasons for testing. One is so that the client knows that the requirements have been met and the system does what it wants it to do, and the analyst needs to do it to prove that they've done everything they should be doing and so they can get paid. So where does the criteria for testing come from? To be tested properly, there needs to be a set of suitable criteria. Now think back what we did in the analysis stage. We came up with a list of requirements that were agreed by both parties. Agreed by the client and agreed by the analyst. So therefore, if everything that is described in the requirements is completed or has been done in the final solution, and we can prove this in testing, then we know that the criteria have been met, and then we know that the system is a success, and that is what both parties will be looking towards. If something hasn't been met, then because we've had the sign-off, we can then look at it and see whether that requirement actually had what was wanted. So if, for example, the client said that they wanted a red user interface, if we go back to the client's requirements and the agreement of the requirements, and if it said blue in that requirements and the client had agreed to it, then they cannot argue the point that the requirements haven't been met. So that requirements phase is very important, as we've discussed before. So the criteria for testing is the requirements documentation, and that was agreed in the analysis stage. Apologies. Right, so there's two types of testing we're going to look at. One is functional and the other is user. We'll look at functional testing first. This is the testing that the solution against the requirements to see it actually works properly. So it's done by the analyst. So we get in the analyst is getting the requirements and testing that everything works. He will collect evidence and prove that it meets each of the requirements. He can then use this evidence to back up why he should be getting paid. He will test using two types of data, normal data and abnormal data. So an example here is an email. So normal data would be email that could be accepted. So l.stevens@nla.co.uk would be accepted because we've got an @ sign in it, we've got .co.uk in it, and so on. Again, 123@nla.co.uk excuse me, would also be accepted. And we also test for abnormal data to see that the system will reject data that shouldn't be entered. So in this case, for this email, I would have had some sort of validation rule to make sure that if I didn't have a .co.uk or .com or something on the end like that, then the email would be rejected. Equally, if I didn't have an @ sign in my email address, then again the email address would be rejected. So those two examples there, l.stevens@nla on its own would be rejected, l.stevens@nla.co.uk without an @ sign would be rejected. So we check to see that those would accept the top two and the bottom two would be rejected. If they weren't, then we know we've got a problem and we need to go back and fix it. So the next type of testing we look at is user testing. Quite simply, this is the end user as a tester. This is used to ensure that the user accepts that the system does what it's supposed to do. A very simple set of testing. The user goes through and uses the new system and checks that it does everything they wanted it to do. Again, if we have any problems, we go back to our requirements phase. So that is everything that is involved in the evaluation phase, or the testing phase as it's sometimes called. Make sure, just one final point, make sure that you learn the importance of testing. So the two reasons there might come up in an exam question, the criteria might come in an exam question, and the two types of testing, functional and user. So you could potentially get a big 8-mark question based on that. You might get one part of that might say what is functional testing, describe functional testing, and that could give you 2 or 3 marks possibly. So you need to learn each of these.